Okay, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. This is the audio newsletter for Sightedmoon. And you can see the title is A Flaming Bag of Dog Turd. The date is January the 2nd, 2020 on the Roman calendar. 2021. Takes me a while to adjust. And the actual date is the 17th day of the 11th month. And let's just begin. The news continues to show us growing food lines. Okay, I read this, I scanned through this earlier, so this isn't really pertinent to the topic. Here it is. It starts here. A flaming bag of dog turd. In recent months, I have been asked to judge and condemn a certain situation that has taken place in the Philippines. Because of our close association with Brother Ike and MLTC, that's Messiah Light of the Torah Center, I believe, I was told I was guilty by association. That Brother Ike was guilty by not condemning the situation. At first, I dismissed it because it was not in my sphere of responsibility. It was a Filipino problem. And let me just start my video there. And I was not there to judge it. Let's move this to the top. I did not have all the facts, but only bits and pieces from what others were telling me. I was trying to stay out of it. But then more and more people began to talk. In spite of my telling them to stop this Lashon Hara, they would continue to talk with others and form judgments about Ike and myself and all those involved and those not involved. And to be honest, personally, I don't think there's enough information for us to go on. So I don't think it's appropriate for me to comment on this situation. I'll just read what is probably appropriate. It's hard for me to determine, but I think we'll just stick to what the scriptures are saying here. So that's James chapter 3, verses 1 to 12. Many people only apply scriptures when it suits them. The moment they are confronted with their own sins, their eyes go blind and they can only see the sins of others. All of us have screwed up and sinned. Some have done horrendous things in our past, some not so bad. But how would you like to have your sin singled out and advertised not just across your town, not just across your nation, though that would be bad enough, but to have your sin singled out to be the fodder of the entire world, like the tabloids, to be laughed at and made sport of by everyone else out there. You would have no place to hide and no time to make it right. How many of you have slept with other people? How many of you have slept men with men, same sex, women with women? How many of you have had abortions? How many of you have been drunk or driven while drunk and killed somebody? How many of you are divorced, were divorced or separated? How many of you have thought or think you have done the unpardonable sin? I'm going to add here, how many of us have been suicidal and wanted to take our own life, because that's also bad. Forgive me, I should not be asking these questions of you. You all are now Torah keepers, and you now have the right to point the fingers and condemn to hell the rest of the world. You who were forgiven so much by Yah, have you forgotten how much he has wiped from his memory of just how evil you were or are still? And there's the parable of the unforgiving servant. Matthew chapter 18, verses 21 to 35. You have been forgiven so much. Why do you go around and accuse the brethren of the things they are entrapped in? When people do this, I have to ask, who do they work for, Yah or Satan? Revelation 12, verse 10. There is this thing that some teens do. They will fill a bag with dog poo, light it on fire, toss it on the front porch of a home, and ring the doorbell of the homeowner. He sees the fire and immediately starts to stamp it out before the house catches on fire. As he does this heroic act to save his home, he gets I should say hot dog poo, not hot dog, but hot poop of a dog all over his porch and shoes or his feet, and may even run back inside the house in his excitement, spreading the stink everywhere he goes. Wow, that's really a dastardly prank when you really think about it. If I sound perturbed, then you may be right. I did not want to talk about this subject, and I didn't want to do a video on this subject either, but here we are. I have tried to avoid the subject as best I can in the past, but now that this flaming bag of dog turd has been thrown on my front porch, I have no choice but to go out and stomp the flames down, or risk setting the porch and the house on fire. Such is the power of the tongue. Now, let me tell you what is going on. I had to call Brother Ike and ask him what was going on. The rumors I heard were disturbing, and we have people threatening to stop supporting this work, Sightedmoon, and to tell others to stop doing so as well. I just wanted the facts, not all the hearsay, and it now has to be shared here. Okay, yikes, that's a bit dangerous. As well to stop the blasted rumors from continuing. The rumors about Ike and others in MLTC were not true and not even close to being true. Okay, that's an interesting statement. How do you determine that? So I was glad to learn that and not be left with a very bad taste in my mouth. At Sukkot 2020, a man new to Torah. Okay, here we go. Here we're getting into the information here about this situation that's going on. So there's some information. A man new to Torah was attending with MLTC in the Philippines. His marriage was rocky, from what I understand. I do not know for sure. Okay, so that's important. He doesn't know for sure, so that may or may not be true. He was not any one of the elders, so he's just a member there, a new guy. He and much of his extended family were helping Brother Ike to build the Torah Center there, of which Sightedmoon has been sponsoring. Now, the man's daughter has a best friend who just broke up with her boyfriend. So this is a woman, 19 years old. She seeks advice from the father of her best friend, the man who's new to Torah, about her relationship because she had trouble there. You can see broke up. She's also new to Torah and attending at Sukkot, so they're both new. In counseling, they became close to each other, and as the rain began, okay, so there was rain happening, and they went into a nearby fan. I don't know what that means, but they went into a shelter, I suppose. The young girl became pregnant by this married man. Uh, this is why women should not be alone with those they are seeking advice from, especially elders, although this man was not an elder in Torah. Um, right now, many of you are getting out the rope to hang this 40-something-year-old man for having sex with this 19-year-old. On what grounds? Let's now go to the Torah and see what Yah says. If you do not like it, then you have to take it up with Yah, but you are supposed to be an ambassador to the kingdom. And do you not know the laws of our kingdom, our coming kingdom? Let me quote an article by Katie McCoy about rape, which is what some of you are thinking. But this 19-year-old was not raped. It was consensual. She did not scream for help. She was not betrothed to another man. So if you are going to judge, then you had better have all the facts. And that's important. We need all the facts. I mean, if you're going to judge it, I mean, not if you're just going to talk about it and gossip about it. And then you had better know what Yah says. Okay, so I'm just going to scan through this. Talking about sexual assault against women. Um, okay. The Old Testament gives us a law on just how much Elohim takes up the cause of the victim and the vulnerable. There's one passage in Deuteronomy 22 that safeguarded women who had been violated. Okay. So essentially, the law says if, okay, I'm going to look it up. Hold on. So this is Deuteronomy 22, verses 23 to 29. So let's read 22 and just see what it says here. Hopefully you can read this. I zoomed in. No pun intended. 22 right at the end. Can't find my mouse anymore. Oh, there it is. Okay. It says here, if there be a young damsel espoused to a man, so engaged, and a man should have found her in the city and have lain with her, so another person, not the fiance, has sex with her, you shall bring them both out to the gate of the city. And they shall be stoned with stones, and they shall die, both of them, the damsel because she cried not in the city, and the man because he humbled his neighbor's spouse. So you shall remove the evil one from yourselves. But if a man find in the field a damsel that is betrothed, and he should force her and lie with her, you shall kill or slay the man that lay with her only. So she wouldn't be guilty, obviously, because she's the victim. She's been raped. And the damsel has not committed a sin worthy of death, as if a man should rise up against his neighbor and slay him. So is this thing. Because he found her in the field, the betrothed damsel cried, and there was none to help her. And if anyone should find, I think this is what we're talking about in this particular situation, if anyone should find a young virgin who has not been betrothed, so she's single and not involved with anybody, no engagement, and should force her and lie with her and be found, the man, so this is somebody raping a young virgin, and I think this is a woman, obviously, well, not obviously, but it's a woman that is being suggested here. The man who lay with her shall give to the father of the damsel 50 silver didrachms. She shall be his wife, because he has humbled her. He shall never be able to put her away. Wow, never. That's a pretty strong statement. And that's the end for that particular what we're looking at there. So when we're looking at this situation, God is protecting this virgin. There's another detail in the law. They are discovered. Okay. So this is not about rape. This is consensual. Okay, if you've seen season 1 of Downton Abbey, think Mary Crawley and the Turkish diplomat. The man is held accountable and must marry and provide for the woman. Plus, he can never divorce her for the rest of his life. So you can see the British have a similar law, and I think they took it from the Torah. That's what I believe, at least. They got inspiration there, or it was just adopted. A young woman was seduced in Exodus 22, and it says in Exodus 22, the man has to pay a price of dowry. Exodus 22. Let's see if we can go there. So that's an interesting, some people don't really look at this section of the Bible. They just look at, don't commit adultery, which if you're really being technical about that, adultery includes those who are married only. So if you're both single, that's not adultery. Adultery is when you sleep with another man's wife or husband. That's adultery because they're breaking the covenant of marriage. That's adultery. 22. Okay, Exodus 22 verses 16 to 17. Let's look at that. All right, it says here, verse 16. If anyone deceive a virgin that is not betrothed, so entice or seduce, deceive is similar, and lie with her, he shall surely endow her for a wife to himself. And if her father positively refuse and will not consent to give her to him for a wife, he shall pay compensation to her father according to the amount of the dowry of virgin. So there's a price that has to be paid monetarily, and that's the end of that law regarding a woman who was that a man that a man lay with, had sex with. Okay, so you had to pay a price of a dowry, which means he was out the money set aside for a bride. He still had no wife. There was no punishment for the girl, and I looked up this dowry. The modern equivalent of this dowry, if you pay this, if you convert it into our modern currency, this dowry, this bride price would cost at least, the very least, I think it's $20,000 US. Something like 10, I think it's between 10,000 US dollars to, I believe, as much as 25,000 US dollars. So anyhow, however you cut it, it's as much as a wedding, like a small wedding, or a really expensive ring. But what value, what profit is that amount of money? Not money, sorry. I should say what profit is a ring or a party for one night to a family who's giving up their daughter? It's much better served as money. They can use that money. It can last them at least a year, maybe two. But anyhow, that's the bride price, and that's the judgment of Yah in this situation where the man has to pay the father. Even if he refuses, you still pay it. That's interesting. Okay. So some look at these laws and claim the Bible permits or even legalizes sexual assault. This is controversial. Therefore, the Bible is oppressive to women. So it's saying, yeah, it's okay, you can rape women, and the Bible just turns a blind eye, basically. Yet in each of these scenarios, the victim is protected. So it doesn't turn a blind eye, it's protecting them. And the violator is punished. They have to pay a price. There's consequences for their actions. Where the woman was not at fault, she never received blame. In fact, she wasn't vindicated. None of these situations were supposed to happen. Elohim never intended for women to be violated or raped, and he certainly does not turn a blind eye to it. These laws restrained human sinfulness and set Elohim's people apart from their surrounding cultures. But even more, they reveal the nature and character of an Elohim who protects the victim, provides for the vulnerable, and sides with the violated. Elohim is decidedly pro women. The atrocity of rape is a disordered exploitation of all that Elohim designed when he created male and female. From the very beginning, he intended for women to be protected and valued, whether she is a college sophomore at an Ivy League university, a 14-year-old Nigerian girl abducted by Boko Haram, a group that doesn't spread peace. Let's just say it that way. I don't want to get flagged. Or a 65-year-old woman finding the courage to break her silence. An assault against Eve is an assault against Eden. And one day, every wrong committed against her daughters, will be righted by a justice-keeping Elohim. So, how do you judge this case now? Have the insatiable tongues been quenched? Was Mary Magdalene stoned? Was Mary Magdalene stoned for her adultery in which she was caught and the very act of doing? Yet the man was not brought before Yeshua to be judged, and that when you don't do things according to the guidelines, the specific guidelines, you can't keep the law. You actually break the law. They thought they kept the law, the Pharisees, the scribes, when they brought the woman, but they broke the law because they didn't fulfill the other part of it. If you don't keep the full law, you're breaking it. They didn't do it righteously. That's not justice. They didn't seek the justice of the Father. According to the law, according to the law of Moshe, this man in the Philippines did not commit adultery. Okay, but wasn't he married? I thought he was married. I mean, he committed adultery against his wife because he's married, so definitely did something wrong there. Broke the covenant, the marriage covenant, assuming he was married. I don't remember if it said he was married, but he is the father of this girl who's best friends with this uh, young lady. But he did not rape the 19-year-old. That's true. According to all I've heard, it was consensual. Um, Maybe this would fall into fornication, not adultery. This flaming bag of dog turd does not end there. No, this patent place, I don't know what that means, of the tongue has more twists and turns to sort out. There was talk again, uh, because I do not have all the facts. There was talk that the man and the original wife were separated. Okay, so they're no longer together, according, well, rumor has it. I'm talking about rumors now and gossip, but anyhow, we don't really know. So this situation is very gray. Uh, we can't say for sure. We can't really judge for sure. I do not know, nor do I care, but we are going to stomp on this bag of poop. I'm gonna say poop instead until it is completely out, till the fire is out. Are you who want to judge aware that in the Philippines it is against the law to get a divorce? Yes, I'm aware of this because of the Catholic Church. I believe that's why. The following is a February 2020 article about getting divorced in the Philippines. Even by the standards of former Spanish colonies, the Philippines has extremely socially conservative laws. It is the only country in the world, bar the Vatican City, to outlaw divorce, except if you're Muslim. The only way of ending a marriage, short of dying, is to have it annulled, but that can be done only on narrow grounds and at great expense. Abortion is illegal too, and anyone undergoing or performing one risks up to 6 years in prison. Wow, I didn't know that part. Contraceptives, although not banned, are the subject of fierce legal battles as opponents try to prevent the state from distributing them. I guess that's why the population is like over 100 million, I think. If you and your spouse live in the Philippines, you cannot get divorced. So, what many people who once loved each other and who now hate each other do is to separate. And this brings us to the very subject we were discussing in our Torah portion last Sabbath on the Zoom. Matthew 19, verses 3 to 9. And basically it says, um, whatever Elohim has joined together, let nobody separate. And talks about how Moses commanded to give a bill of divorce, but only because of their stubbornness, I suppose, their hard-heartedness. And you can put away your wife for fornication or death, but otherwise you commit adultery if you marry her. Uh, okay. Let us focus on the word in verse 9. The word is put away, or the words are. The put away is uh, apoluo, to set free, to let go, dismiss, to release. Let us understand this from the Torah. Apoluo in Greek is, in the Hebrew, shalach. To which situation did God say, I hate putting away, divorce? We have heard the scripture, Yah, Elohim of Israel, says he hates divorce. This is almost always quoted as if God hates all divorces in general, but that's just not true. We have previously read from the Bible, books of Ezra, Nehemiah, Jeremiah, Deuteronomy, and so on. God is not against divorce. Then why all the confusion concerning why Elohim said he hates divorce? The reason for this confusion is because there are two kinds of marriages and two divorces being mentioned in Malachi 2, 11 to 16. And let's look over that. Malachi 2, verses 11 to 16. Okay, let's just pause it for a moment. So here we are, Malachi 2, verses 11 to 16. Judah, Yehuda has been forsaken, and an abomination has been committed in Israel and in Jerusalem. For Yehuda has profaned the holy things of Yah, which he delighted in, and has gone after other Elohim. Yah will utterly destroy the man that does these things until he be even cast down from out of the tabernacles of Yaakov. I have to stick with the Y now because I said all the J's are Y's or I's. And from among them that offer sacrifice to Yah Almighty. These things which I hated, you did. You covered with tears the altar of Yah, and with weeping and groaning because of troubles. It is meet for me to have respect to your sacrifice. Oh, is it meet for me to have respect to your sacrifice, or to receive anything from your hands is welcome? You can see it's quite different from what the Masoretic is saying here. Okay. But you said, why? Wherefore? Because Yah has borne witness between you and the wife of your youth, whom you have forsaken. And yet she was your partner and the wife of your covenant. So it's much more serious than just dealing treacherously. No, you forsake her. You forsook her. You just abandoned her. And did he not do well? There was the residue of his spirit. But you said, what does Elohim seek but a seed? But take you heed to your spirit, and forsake not the wife of your youth. So he's talking to him directly. But if you should hate your wife and put her away, so divorce her, says Yah, Elohim of Israel, then ungodliness shall cover your thoughts. Wow. I never heard it that way before. This is ahead of where I am in my current study. Says Yah Almighty, therefore take ye heed to your spirit and forsake them not. So forsake not your wife. That's what it's saying. So don't leave her. And if you put her away, what happens? Ungodliness shall cover your thoughts. Wow. And it's completely different than what's happening here. It's not violence covering a garment. It's ungodliness covering your thoughts. And again, forsaking and not dealing treacherously. You that have provoked Elohim with your words, but you said, wherein have we provoked him? In that you say, everyone that does evil is pleasing to or in the sight of Yah, and he takes pleasure in such. And where is the God of justice? Okay, so that's the end of that. Okay, let's read on here. So 2 divorces, right? The divorces were not official divorces. They didn't need to be. They were already previously married and unofficially married again. The Hebrew word shalach means putting away, a separation, as correctly translated in most Bibles. However, the King James and a number of new versions have incorrectly translated it to mean divorce. It never meant divorce, and it doesn't mean divorce. The word was most likely translated as divorce to fit what was taught in the church. Shalak is just a common word used throughout the Old Testament, which means to go, separate, or to send. That's it. So why did God say that he hated putting away, a separation? Because you have not kept my ways concerning marriage, divorce, and remarriage, you have shown partiality in the law. The law specifically stated that when a man got a divorce from his wife, he has to write her a certificate of divorce and put in her hand, and shalak, send her out, put her away. God also commanded them not to marry anyone who did not serve him, who served a foreign god. So recall what we just read just a moment ago. Uh, he hated that Israel forsake his wife. He forsaked her, or forsook her. It's not just separating; it's really forsaking her. He just forgot about her and left her, and I mean that's abandonment. Okay, I think it's more serious than just separating. You can see this is a complete abandonment. You're not even taking care of her. It seems. Uh, okay, instead, men separated from their wives without ever giving them a certificate of divorce, uh, and then illegally married someone else. This is why Yah said they were still their wife by covenant. Okay, let me just move this a little bit. I want to zoom in a little closer. You can always, if you have trouble reading, you can just do that. See, it's a little bit bigger. That might do it. Okay, so let's go back up here. All right. Oh, we lost our spot. Okay. Where am I in here? Okay. Men separated from their wives without ever giving them a certificate of divorce, and then illegally married someone else. This is why Yah said that they were still their wife by covenant. The marriage covenant had never been dissolved by the divorce certificate. Um, okay, so they need to present them a certificate of divorce officially, but not just for any reason. Like you don't like the way she does her hair, for instance. Yah's holy institution, which he loves, the Yah has been witness between you and the wife of your youth, and she is still your companion and your wife by covenant. For Yah Elohim of Israel says he hates divorce, shalak. Separating without a certificate of divorce, so that's a technicality there. He has illegally married the daughter of a foreign Elohim. May Yah cut off the man who does this being awake and aware. Because these men had remarried illegally, separated from their wives without giving them a certificate of divorce, they were in adultery, as Yeshua stated. And I have to qualify here that, yeah, you do have to present them a certificate of divorce, but it can't just be for any reason. It has to be for only two reasons. Well, I guess death. You can't present a certificate if they're dead. And the other reason is adultery. And maybe abuse. Maybe that's another one that could possibly be considered, but that wasn't outright stated, so I can't insert that. Oh, let me just pause for a moment. Okay, I'm just going to finish this paragraph and then continue, take a break. These men had remarried illegally, separated from their wives without giving them a certificate of divorce. They were in adultery, as Yeshua stated. Furthermore, it has been said, whoever puts away his wife, let him give her a certificate of divorce. So that's what you're supposed to do. But I say to you, whoever puts away, separates, and remarries without being divorced for any reason, so that's the way they're interpreting it here, for any reason except sexual immorality, causes her to commit adultery, and whoever marries this woman who is put away commits adultery. Yah never forgot about the Malachi incident when he came to earth to redeem lost man. The Old Testament Hebrew word shalak and the New Testament Greek word apoluare are equivalent, which will be discussed later. So I'm going to pause and continue later. Okay, so the Old Testament Hebrew word shalak and the New Testament Greek word apoluare equivalent, which will be discussed later. Because these disobedient men still had undivorced wives, Yah did not command them to give their illegal wives a certificate of divorce. Rather, they simply had to separate, put them away. So did Elohim hate divorce? No. Rather, Elohim hated that the husbands were separating from their wives without giving them a certificate of divorce, which would enable them to get remarried. This is what Elohim hates. Okay, you know what? That's an interpretation. I don't agree with that, to be honest, because what Yeshua said was, don't let anyone separate what Elohim has put together. So if we're just gonna, I mean, it depends. I think every situation is the case by case basis. I can't just say no, and I can't just say yes. So we have to use wise judgment when it comes to everybody's situation. Because as we know, the only exceptions are death, adultery, right? And possibly abuse, life-threatening situation where the spouse is trying to kill the other spouse, something like that, where they just did not know about what they were getting into, and it is life-threatening to them, or maybe it threatens their spiritual life. I don't know. Maybe they dabble in something dark that they did not know of previously before they entered this covenant. But you really need to do your due diligence before you make such a commitment. Okay, so continuing on, the men of Israel were separating from their wives for self-gratifying reasons. Elohim himself was a witness of their original marriage ceremony, which was still in effect. The marriage covenant was never dissolved by a certificate of divorce. The men remarried outside their own culture and tribe. Actually, I'm not going to say that word because it's actually, we're all the same race. Elohim considered the children they bore unholy because of the mixed marriages, bringing curses into their family. So this is a mixing of culture, mixing of religion, mixing of ways of life. They are not compatible. Because it's not compatible when you're set apart to Elohim and you're doing his will, and then the other person you're with isn't set apart. They're not living according to his will. They're doing what they want. And then so you have a situation where the spirit of Elohim is clashing with the will of the flesh, of just human wisdom and what people want to do who are led by their flesh, by their carnal desires. Because of these unauthorized marriages, the word of Elohim came to Ezra and Nehemiah, and to have the men and women of Israel who had done this thing to separate from their spouse and even from their children. Wow, that's pretty drastic, doesn't it? It sounds like it's drastic, right? But that's what was told for them to do. Let's read this. Nehemiah 13:23 to 27. So verses 23 to 30 of Nehemiah 23. Okay. Right. Here it is. It says here, in those days I saw the Jews who had married women of Ashdod, of Ammon, and of Moab. So these were women who were not married, and they made them their wives. The children spoke half in the language of Ashdod and did not know how to speak in the Jewish language, which is Hebrew. I strove with them and I cursed them, and I smote some of them, and plucked off their hair and made them swear by Elohim, saying, "You shall not give your daughters to their sons. You shall not take of their daughters to your sons." Did not Solomon, king of Israel, sin thus, in this way? Though there was no king like him among many nations, he was beloved of Elohim. And Elohim made him king over all Israel. Yet strange women turned him aside. So that's the problem here. This is bigger than divorce, actually, when you think about it. It's the spiritual incompatibility. So we will not hearken to you to do all this evil, to break covenant with our Elohim. So you're breaking the covenant with Elohim by making this covenant with strange wives. So you can see the dynamic or the different levels of importance. It's called prioritization. The priority here isn't the marriage covenant with these strange wives. The priority is the marriage covenant with our Father, with with Elohim. That's the number one priority. Everything else is secondary. So they were allowed to divorce these strange wives because their commitment to Elohim was greater. And you can see that in the lives of Yeshua, uh, lives of his disciples, the life of Paul or Shaul, where a lot of them were married or were never married, but they decided to choose a life of a bachelor, being a bachelor basically, or living a life where their life was devoted to the gospel, spreading the gospel, to doing the work of Elohim full time, and not being distracted by a wife and kids, because that takes up a lot of time, as a lot of parents will know, a lot of energy and a lot of years. And Eliashib, the high priest of the sons of Joada, son-in-law of Sanballat, okay, the Uranite, I chased him away from me. Remember them, O Elohim, for their connection with the priesthood, or false connection, and the covenant of the priesthood and the Levites. Okay, so these are all inserted, all these brackets, words in brackets. So I purged them from all foreign connection and established courses for the priests and the Levites, every man according to his work. Okay, so these people did not do a good job of representing the Levites. And the offering of the wood bearers. Okay, so that's it. That's all for that section. Because of these unauthorized marriages, the word of Elohim came to Ezra and Nehemiah to have the men and women of Israel who had done this thing to separate from their spouse and even from their children. Okay. In this situation, Elohim's command was to put them away, separate yourselves from them. This was not the kind of marriage to which Elohim was saying, "I hate divorce." He was saying loudly, "Get out of these wrong marriages." Divorce is a method to separate the one and make them into two, just as a surgeon's knife is used to separate the cancerous flesh from the healthy flesh. Both operations are good. Divorce can be used to kill a righteous marriage, just as a surgeon's knife can be used to kill a healthy person. The Greek word apoluo is the equivalent of Hebrew word shalak. In this case, we are stomping on this person from the Philippines. It does not matter if the man is separated from his wife, because in the Torah, Jehovah does not condemn having more than one wife. This is where we start to get into the whole fiasco going on here, because this man could take this 19-year-old girl as his second wife, whether or not he is divorced from the first wife. Okay. And that is what he is doing in order to make right the wrong he did by having sex with her and getting her pregnant. Okay. Well, they didn't get married before, so I still think it's not exactly in the clear. The right thing to do is to marry her before you do that, before you fornicate. It's premarital sex, isn't it? This way, the 19-year-old has a husband, 19-year-old woman has a husband. The child will have a father to raise it if they have a child. Okay, I want to read Ezra 9, if I may. As you can see in Ezra chapter 10, verse 2, the people of Israel admitted that they broke the covenant with their Elohim. They took strange wives of the nations of the land. Yet now there is patience to Israel concerning this thing. Uh, there is long suffering, I guess you could say, from Elohim towards them. Now then let us make a covenant with our Elohim to put away all the wives and their kids, as you shall advise. I mean, you kind of have these memes of men just abandoning their families, um, single mothers and these baby daddies or baby mamas or whatever they call it in our culture, where the dad just says, nope, can't deal with this. But this is not that same situation. This is to do with their covenant with Elohim. This isn't them just uh, responsibility, dodging responsibility. They don't want to be responsible adult. That's not what it is. They should be responsible adults, when you look at Torah, they should still be providing for their women and children. I don't think they got off scot free, and you know that they don't have any duties, responsibilities to their families. It just says that they put away their wives, but doesn't and their offspring. It doesn't say that they don't provide for them anymore. They're just no longer gonna have them in their households. It's what it seems like to me, at least. So let's not have any ideas that you can just do this. Have kids and then abandon your family and not provide for them. I think there's still provision because Elohim's a good Elohim. He's not gonna just leave them, abandon them completely. I don't think that's the case here. So let's see. Continuing on, let me now share what I wrote a few years ago. In 2017, I wrote the following article on polygamy. Amongst the Hebrew roots groups are people who have been using the Bible to justify their position to have multiple wives. Abraham had Hagar, the handmaid, and that was uh, Hagar who had Sarah, who suggested to take Hagar. Yaakov, and that's Leah and Rachel, and that's because he was deceived. King David, obviously, was a king. He wanted to be like everyone else and had a harem. Then Solomon, who was the largest harem probably in human history, and others. And they went against the Torah. It says, "Do not multiply wives to yourselves," specifically to kings. And Jacob, by taking both, he was deceived. I have to admit, he was deceived. You have to qualify that. It's not like he chose Leah and Rachel. He only chose one, but he was deceived to marry both. And there was a rivalry that took place, as we know. And they even gave him their handmaids. So he actually had 4 women that he was doing it with. And Abram had 2. So you can see the more women you have, the more problems you have. Kind of like more money, more problems, more wives, more problems, or more women. Jehovah even said to David after he sinned with Bathsheba that he would have given David more. That is the argument of those pushing for polygamy. Let us look at the scriptures and see what they have to say in 2 Samuel 12. So let's look that up. Just make sure, keep it honest. So let's do what the Bereans did. Prove it. Let's prove it that it actually says that, because who knows? So 2 Samuel chapter 12 and verse 1. Moving on, I know where it is. It says here, Nathan said, verse 7, "You are the man that has done this. Thus says Yah, Elohim of Israel, I anointed you to be king over Israel, and I rescued you out of the hand of Saul, and I gave you the house of your Lord, Saul, and the wives of your Lord into your bosom." So multiple women. So no problem there. That actually says that. "And I gave to you the house of Israel and Judah. And if that had been little, I would have given you yet more." So if these multiple wives and all this wealth, if all of this were not enough, I would have given you more. So you can see that Yah isn't condemning having multiple wives, not at all. But let's let's just set this straight. David is a king. He can afford to keep multiple wives. A regular Joe, a regular person that's not a king, will not be able to take care of multiple wives. You won't have the wealth to take care of them, to provide for them, and the children they would eventually give birth to. King David could. So if you can't take care of these multiple wives and children as well, you shouldn't be having multiple wives and children. But if you are a billionaire, a millionaire, you can afford it, then yeah, go ahead, right? Why not? So the Torah isn't against that. Clearly, it isn't. Uh, it's not the ideal, but Torah isn't against having multiple wives if you can take care of them. That's the big if. And I'm going to say another if is these wives you're taking are also single. They're not married. But he took Bathsheba, a married woman, from a good man, Uriah. And, well, the law says if he's dead, you can take her. And, well, he kind of murdered him to fulfill that requirement. So he's not exactly free of that uh, guiltiness. So that's why he says here, now therefore the sword shall not depart from your house forever, because he did that to Uriah. Okay, so we set that straight, and that's what the word says. The Torah says that, and I shouldn't say the Torah, the Tanakh, because the Tanakh is outside of the law. Um, do you see how they have taken this verse out of context and applied it to their cause? Yeah. Yah was not speaking about the wives, but was speaking about all he had done for David and how he would have given him much, much more had he obeyed. And yes, Bathsheba was a Hittite, not an Israelite. Today, he would have called her a German and not a Jew. Who can forget the explicit admonition of Moses in Deuteronomy 17:17? Okay, let's look at that. Okay, so here we are, Deuteronomy 17:17, easy to remember. And we're looking for the verse where it says, do not multiply your wives. Do not multiply wives to yourself. And it says here, all the people shall fear. Okay, when you enter the land, he shall surely set you a ruler, over you a ruler. So this is talking about the ruler himself. He shall not multiply to himself horses. He shall not, so this is the ruler, he shall not multiply to himself wives, lest his heart turn away. And he shall not greatly multiply to himself silver and gold. So this is a command. King David and King Solomon should not have multiplied wives, even though they could afford it. They shouldn't have done that. And Joseph is correct, Joseph Dumond, in saying that Yah wasn't referring to the wives, saying I would have given you more. He's talking about the things that pertain to Saul, but not including the wives. He's talking about the things he had done for him, not the wives specifically. So if this applied to the great kings of Israel, how much more than the subjects of the kingdom? Of course, the kings are held to a higher standard, and the people would not be exempt from this multiplying of wives. The new ammo I have recently come to understand comes from my friend Nehemiah Gordon in one of his podcasts. You can listen to it here at this link and start to listen at the 49-minute mark. They're talking about the curtain that hung on the tabernacle and how it is joined together, or I should say curtains, how they are joined together. Exodus 26:3 and 36:10. This word coupled is the Hebrew word chabar. It means to join, literally or figuratively. Stop there. These 5 curtains are coupled together The Hebrew says chabar ish sha. Okay, not going to read that. The first form is feminine. The second form is regular plural. This verse is saying a woman joined unto her sister. The curtains in Hebrew is feminine. They are joined. Okay, that's a little not necessary. What does this mean? Okay. Leviticus 18. 18, let's look that up. You shall not take a wife in addition to her sister as a rival to uncover her nakedness in opposition to her while she is yet living. So we can see the Masoretic is saying, take a wife to her sister. So in addition to as a rival, so that's just vexing her, but a rival is clearly, competition, not just annoying her, to uncover her nakedness besides the other in her lifetime. So to uncover her nakedness in opposition to her. So you can see this competitiveness, this adversarial kind of action that you're doing. It is not good. It's not helping these sisters. It's not helping anyone's life. It's just selfish, really. It's selfish. It's not good. Unless that's the only situation that can happen where there's no men, but we know that's a very apocalyptic situation. There's pretty much men everywhere and women everywhere for the time where we are living right now, that we don't have that problem. It says here Abraham married his half sister. Jacob married the sisters Leah and Rachel. Concerning the curtains, about taking a woman unto her sister, this is a Hebrew idiom. It means one unto another one. It does not mean literally a woman unto her sister, but it means one woman unto another woman. Okay, that's one way to interpret it, or to women. The next word here is vex, and actually, no, it's not actually vex. It is a rival. It's a rival. So that is not how we're going to read it. You are not to take another woman to trouble the first woman. No, it's a rival. When the first woman is dead, then you can take another woman for a wife. It could be her literal sister or just another woman in general. The Hebrew word for sister, wife, is sarar, and one that is a vexer or a troubler. Okay, Hagar was a sister wife to Sarah. Okay, I guess if you're looking at things that way, that could qualify in terms of sister. But I don't know. I mean, kind of in addition to her sister, that sounds like her blood relations. Because right before this is talking about daughters and sons. Don't take her son's daughter. Don't take her daughter's daughter. Like, it's pretty explicit. It's not figurative. I'm going to stick with the literal. And I'm going to stick with the sister part too. I mean, yeah, you can open it up to possibly being other women, but that's a little, you're stretching it, I think. You shall not go into a woman under separation for uncleanness to uncover her nakedness. And you shall not lie with your neighbor's wife to defile yourself with her. Well, that's adultery, clearly. And we're going to end that part there. So again, I think it's, you get into some trouble when you get into some of these Hebrew interpretations that are not exactly lining up with what the Septuagint is saying. That's a problem because vexing, as you can see, just this thing with vexing, annoying of why would it be bad to annoy a wife? I'm not saying it's good, but that's not what Yah is saying here. He's not saying annoy your wife. He's saying don't take a rival. This is bigger than just annoying. This is what happened with Leah and Rachel. Leah and Rachel, they had this problem of being rivals. It was a problem. Okay, this is going to be a very long video. I'm just going to try to skip forward ahead. Well, not skip forward, just push forward. In the beginning, Yah made Eve from man. From Adam, they became one flesh. It was not Adam and okay. All right, I'm not gonna say that. That's gonna get me flagged maybe. So basically, it was meant to be man and woman. Okay, that's it. Period. End of story. It was one man, one woman. Any other women in that relationship would have been a vexer. Okay, sure. You know what? I'm not gonna even go there because I know it says sister, and we've seen situations where sometimes a man had to take another wife because she was not being provided for. She was just going to be an old maid, right? Um, there are times where you have to do that. The Hebrew word for second wife is sarar. Okay, it's not going to be good. Okay, right. He's warning us. You shall not take a sister wife to vex her. Okay, you are not to take or to have multiple wives. And you know what? That's what it says. You can't really argue that. But again, in that society, if a woman is not provided for, they'll just end up dead and childless. So, although you should not, it's not outright. It's not outright condemned where Yah is going to kill you for doing so. Because if that was the case, King David and King Solomon would just been killed like immediately. He wouldn't condone it at all. Yah wouldn't have condoned that. Neither Jacob, neither Abraham, but it's not the ideal. It's not the best situation for any man to have multiple wives. But if that's the reality and you just deal with it and you go forward, then yeah, your life's a lot harder. You make life harder for yourself. Ideally, one woman. That's the model that we see in Revelation. The Lamb and his bride. It's not brides. One more scripture to look at. Leviticus 26:25, about 10 women baking in one oven. Okay. During this time at the end of the age, during this time of the end of this age, directly in front of us, men will be killed off, just as you watched this word, is, take all the men and slaughter them, and take the women and rape them. 10 women will join themselves to one man for protection and to hide their shame from being raped. But this verse, Leviticus 26:26, could also be read as the 10 tribes will be consumed in the heat of battle. The point is, it does not endorse or support polygamy. So it's not saying, okay, just have 10 women. No. If you're going to say polygamy is a sin, then you must also say that Abraham was sinning with Hagar and Sarah, and same with Jacob with the 4 women. But Yah never once said this was wrong. He didn't say it was wrong. What he said is don't commit adultery. So if these women are all single and virgins and not betrothed to another man, that's not wrong. It's just not something that is recommended. And, he said don't multiply wives. It's not something where, okay, you multiply wives to yourself, you'll be stoned. It doesn't say that. It just says don't do it. It's a recommendation. I think that's what it is. I think it's more recommendation. But if it has to be, it's more like, okay, well, I told you not to do it. And you're going to see how hard life is going to be. The father of Samuel the prophet had 2 wives. It was not condemned. Okay, let's look at that. 1 Samuel 1, verse 1 to 5. 1 Samuel chapter 1. There was a man of Armathaim Sifa of Mount Ephraim. His name was Elkanah, a son of Jeremiel, the son of Elias, the son of Thoke, and Nasib Ephraim. And he had 2 wives. The name of the one was Hannah, and the name of the second, Phanana. And Phanana had children, but Hannah had no child. The man went up from year to year from a city, from Armathaim to worship and sacrifice to Yah Elohim of hosts. So he's not just lukewarm, he's actually doing what needs to be done. At Shelah and Eli, and there was Eli and his 2 sons, Ophni and Phinehas, the priests of Yah. Okay, so his name is Elkanah, and this is Eli and his two sons were there. And the day came, Elkanah, this is the man with two wives, gave portions to his wife Phinehah and her children. And to Hannah he gave a prime portion because she had no child. Only Elkanah loved Hannah more than the other. But Yah closed her womb. For Yah gave her no child in her affliction, and according to the despondency of her affliction, and she was dispirited on this account, that Yah shut up her womb so as not to give her a child. So she did year by year. Okay, so I think we're getting into this story here. And I guess eventually she had a child. Um, this is interesting. I like this book. It's one of my favorite books. Is uh, Samuel up to Kings. Is just nonstop addictive. Um, so it looks like they have a kid. I think this is where Samuel comes from, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, here it is. Yeah, he knew his wife. Elkanah did. So they knew each other, not knowledge, but intimate relation sexually. She conceived, and that's Samuel. There you go. Okay. So if he didn't approve, if he didn't approve of this, he would have given nothing to them. He would have killed them both. He would have, cursed them or something. But he gave them Samuel, the prophet. He didn't. He didn't. He wasn't harsh towards Elkanah for doing this. King Saul had two wives. King David had 8 wives. King Solomon had 700 wives of royal birth and 300 concubines. Many of the kings of Israel had more than one wife. And as you've just read, Leviticus 26, in the last days, one man will have 10 women cooking for him. And that's not just, like, what's that show, Hell's Kitchen, and they're just doing a challenge. No, they're most likely his wives. You don't cook for a man. Well, in this situation, if you're reading between the lines, it does imply, or there seems to be a sense of them being married to him, since men are like gold, precious gold in those days where it's hard to find a man. And you can see that even today, that there's less male births. Does Jehovah condemn multiple marriages? Never mind your Western 20th century views. What does the Torah say? What did you just read? I'm not expressing my views and my rants here. Again, this subject was thrown on my front porch, and we're going to address it completely. You may not like that Yah does not condemn having many wives, and he doesn't. He just suggests, you shall not multiply wives to yourselves. But again, he didn't say, I'm going to kill you if you do it. He said to David, you're a dead man because what? Because he took Uriah, and he took Uriah's wife and killed Uriah, murdered him by sending him in front of the battle. That's why you're a dead man. And this was a married woman. It's not a virgin or just some girl, a woman that was not betrothed. She was a married woman of a righteous man of Israel. If she was just a woman, virgin, whatever, he took her. That's not wouldn't be as serious. You may not like the fact that Yah says for a man to take and marry the women that he has raped. And again, that says in the Torah, if a woman, a virgin, is raped, that man has to pay the price and he has to marry her and take care of her. And that's what it says. Yah does not need your and my approval. He doesn't need any of our approval. It's just, that's the way it is. But there's more to the story. There's more. The man did take a dowry price to the mother of the 19-year-old young woman. Okay, the one in the Philippines, according to the newsletter. I'm just reading it. I don't really know the situation myself, and it's none of my business, really. The mother accepted that price. Wow, she accepted it and gave her daughter to this man. Wow, that's kind of big if that is true. He did as the Torah said and pay the dowry price. So we're looking at, I don't know how much that would be there, but like I said, at least 10,000 grand US dollars to maybe as much as 25,000. Oh yes, did we mention that the mother was Muslim? Wait, so they're actually Muslim? And according to Islamic law, she is allowed to have and is okay with multiple marriages. Okay, so I guess according to them, but I mean, according to Yah, there's still no problem, I think. Okay. The man's daughter that made a video and called it "My best friend is now my mommy." Wow. That video went viral and was picked up on what is the Philippines National Enquirer, which exploits other people's disasters. Okay, yikes. For their own entertainment and the gossip of all those who read those papers. You have people trying to obey the Torah, coming into Torah, and at the same time, they are also working under Christian and Islamic laws and Filipino laws. You want to be a judge over all of this? Yeah, it's quite a mess, isn't it? Wow. Not gonna lie, that's not an ideal situation. I mean, what happened happened, so he's trying to make it right. Okay. So his best friend is now her mom. All right. Moving on, judging others, Matthew 7, verse 1 to 6. Remember that you are forgiven for your adulteries and your abortions. You are forgiven for all of your sins. And yet, if you want to go out and pound this guy for the mess he's in, be very careful. Yeah, I may have set this up for this man, but also so that he can test you and me. And you know what? That's his life. I'm not gonna. I mean, I don't have all the facts. We don't have all the facts. Let Yah be the judge. Um, and I don't know. I'm not in a position to do anything about this or say anything. I'm just reading this newsletter. Brother Ike and the leaders of MLTC they're not for polygamous marriages. Joseph Dumont and Sightedmoon.com are not for multiple marriages, and neither am I. I don't think that's the best situation, and I don't think Yah says that it's ideal either. The ideal is one wife, and a wife who can bear children. But if she can't, then maybe you would have to take another wife just to keep your generations going, keep your bloodline going. I can't even handle the one wife I had. But the tongues need to be silent. The gossip needs to end. The condemnations need to stop. The mercy this man needs and this girl needs to be extended to them, the same as Yah extended his mercy to you. Yes, Yah forgave you for the evil things you did, and you still may do. I'm sure we think and say a lot of sinful things, and he forgives us for it. So we shouldn't be so condemning, but we still have to exercise some judgment, though. Your sins are not blasted across the TV screens of the entire nation. If you're going to condemn a man and a young woman, you better do so with the Torah, not with a mob mentality. It was the mob mentality that got Yeshua killed. If you do not want to support this ministry or MLTC for standing up for the Torah, then we thank you for walking with us in the past and ask for a blessing on your future travels. But if you can get past your 20th century Western Christian stinking thinking, we welcome you to continue our walk together. Let me make this perfectly clear. It is not Yah's laws that is the bag of dog turd, not at all. When people try to drive a wedge between me and the work we are doing, the work we are doing with Brother Ike in the Philippines and demand that I judge a situation that is not my business, then that is the bag of turd I get upset with, gossip and naysaying and the condemnation of those who need help. Proverbs 26, verses 17 to 20. Okay, I'm going to read that from the Septuagint. For doing it, because if you can't provide for said wives, you have enough financial means and can provide for the wives and the children that they may bear to you, then that's good in a way that they would be happy, and you're going to teach them in the right way to go, the children. These are women who are, Torah observant, Yah fearing, right? As he that lays hold. Okay, we're reading 17 to 20. As he that lays hold of a dog's tail, so is he that makes himself the champion of another's cause. Okay, so that's yikes. Okay, so that's somebody else's business. As those who need correction to put forth words to men, and he that first falls in with the proposal will be overthrown. So are all that lay wait for their own friends, And when they are discovered, say, I did it in jest. So we shouldn't betray our friends. We're going to be overthrown. With much wood, fire increases. But where there is not a double-minded man, strife ceases. So we can see that that's what it's actually saying. It's not talking about, I'm not saying tale-bearing is good. It just doesn't say it's tale-bearing. It's a double-minded man. Don't be double-minded. That causes strife. Let's see if there's anything to do with gossiping here. Doesn't say anything about gossiping. There are things about here. A lying tongue hates the truth. An unguarded mouth causes tumult. So there, you could possibly use that um, to discourage gossiping. If you're gossiping and you're just saying outright lies, or your mouth is unguarded and you're going to cause a lot of strife. Okay, so again, it doesn't say that in the Septuagint. It doesn't say that about the tale-bearing in this specific section. There probably is another section somewhere else that where it does discourage tale-bearing, because that isn't good either. So it says here, stop talking. We're going to close here. Maybe read the comments if they're good. Stop talking about other people and their messed up lives. Stop throwing wood on the flames of others who are striving to figure out this walk just as you and I have. Show some empathy for the mess they find themselves in, just as Yah showed empathy for you, for your life and mine, when he called us to repentance. And we were, in our previous state, we were pathetic. And a lot of us are still pathetic because we are to be pitied. I think that's what it is. We're to be pitied for our fleshly frame. All right, here we go with comments. This is going to be a sea of comments. I haven't seen this many comments in a long time, 16. The Filipino controversy. Okay. All right. So this is, thank you for this article. It is humbling. It's not an easy read. Oh, my husband left me for a Filipina schoolgirl. Yikes. Okay, well, that's not good. Thank you, Joseph, for this newsletter. Okay. Yeah, so the Torah tells us the truth about these things, and there's many suicides committed because of shame and condemnation attached to them, whether these women were divorced or raped. Okay, yeah, that's possible for sure that women would hurt themselves because of the shame that takes place in these kind of situations. Sombra, praying for this young woman, her little one. Okay, I agree. I'm thankful. The Father's given us his Torah to show us how to redeem our mistakes. He paid the bride price. He shows his respect for her and their family. So, I mean, when you follow Yah's Torah, there are blessings for it. And if it is true, he paid the bride price, there's going to be a blessing for doing that. Yeah, I mean, he had a wife or a woman previously, and that's going to be complicated too. But I mean, I don't know the situation there. Only Yah knows, and he knows that's their business. Okay, I really hate it when I think back to a conversation and I did not talk to build up or to encourage. Okay, mind blown. Just finished newsletter. Spent many years telling myself Yah doesn't speak to me. Okay. Matthew, you mentioned forgiveness, which is good, but this comes after repentance. Did the man repent? Okay, this is getting into gossiping. I'm not going to read this, but there's other information that maybe was not included, or there's a lot of information about the situation in the Philippines, and it's very delicate. It's not something I really should comment on. It's not. Again, we shouldn't. Should we condemn this person, or should we just not even? Should we just turn a blind eye to it? I mean, who am I to judge this, right? Because there's a lot of information. We don't know what is true, what is false. And maybe it's everything. Maybe it's all the above. So this is a person new to the faith, and afterwards he committed adultery. So can he use those same excuses? You say based on Torah he didn't commit adultery. Are there two witnesses? So again, there's a lot of information here, which may or may not be true. All this information that I read about this person's life may or may not be true. I mean, only Yah knows the situation. It's hard for me to just go by what is being typed here and what we're reading. But we just pray that Yah would be merciful to all of us for whatever we do. So he gave a dowry. He wants to give a dowry to right his wrong, so be it. But he should not also attempt to marry the adulterous woman. Okay, so who's the adulterous woman? She wouldn't be committing adult. Okay, this 19-year-old woman is not betrothed. She wouldn't be committing adultery on her part because she's single and she's not married. She's not engaged, so she's not the one committing adultery, just on her own. But if we're taking to account the other man who seems to be married, he's the one committing adultery, or is he? Or is she? Okay, hold on a sec. Let me think about this. If I meet a woman who's married and I have sex with her, am I committing adultery? Yeah, I would be. Okay. So she's the one committing adultery because he's married or was married and is separated. So this is a lot of technicalities here, but the woman who is married and doing it with a single man, is that adultery? Well, yeah, she's cheating on her husband. So I guess both are doing adultery. They shouldn't be mingling at all. But if me being single and I meet a single woman, we're not doing adultery if we do it. That's premarital sex, fornication. But the right thing would be to get married, wouldn't it? Give the man over to destruction of the flesh, and if I were to marry a woman that's also single, but she's not in the covenant, she's not keeping Torah, and I am, then my relationship with Yah is more important than the relationship with the wife who's not, you know, worshiping Elohim and not going to raise the kids according to Torah. So Yah would actually, according to Ezra and Nehemiah, what we read there is that it's better to stay faithful to Yah and you put away that wife and the children. Not saying you don't provide for them, you should, but they're not in your household. You're not uh, having them to corrupt you and you know to destroy the seed that Yah has planted and the way of life, the culture that you should um, be doing. And if we're really thinking about this, this is going to get complicated now, but shouldn't the man raise and teach his wife and children to do the right way? Why couldn't they? You would be asking, and I'm asking myself, why couldn't he allow them to teach the wife and the children this is the right way? But it says there that they were speaking in their tongue, the tongue of the other people, not in Hebrew, not the Jewish tongue. So you can see that they weren't even teaching them the right way. Had a bad influence, and the women were really driving the kids. They were leading, spearheading where their kids were going, morally, spiritually. So I guess that's the problem. It has to be a woman that's Torah observant, that fears Yah, is committed to him, and is in covenant with him. Okay. So you seem to be using Exodus 22:16 to justify his adultery. Exodus 22:16 is not about adultery. Okay, according to the comment here. If you're not prepared to judge someone who is in the Torah and yet brazenly commits adultery, how can you judge other matters? We should all have full compliance or confidence to judge a brazen sinner. Okay, yeah, you know what? It's not that I wouldn't want to judge. It's it's very dangerous to make a judgment if I don't have all the facts. And how do we prove these facts without them being able to speak on their own behalves? So you really need to have that man, his wife or former wife, the woman, the young 19-year-old woman. You need all these people to speak on their behalf. If they're not there to speak or present their case, I can't judge this. That's not right. I'm not going to go by this person said this and this person's in the congregation. They heard this. They saw. That's not enough. I don't think that's enough. Yeah, you need two witnesses at least. But how do you know these witnesses aren't lying? They really need to be given a chance to speak, to present their case. Otherwise, it's hearsay, isn't it? Shalom, Matthew. The girl was not betrothed or married, so it was not adultery, although, it was in a way because he was married, or maybe if he was separated, is that still because is that adultery? Because didn't Yeshua say, if you put away a woman and someone else sleeps with her, that's adultery? Isn't that because they're still alive? So this is really, maybe it's a gray area. I don't know, but this is not a simple situation. It's more complex than we're making it out to be. He laid with a virgin. It's not, so yeah, it wasn't rape. We know that. But was it adultery? Okay, here we go. Shalom. I agree with Matthew. We have all sinned. Yeah, agree there. We've all sinned. I still fail to see how the man involved didn't commit adultery. I understand the girl's position. I also understand this situation. We are towing a fine line between fornication and adultery. Yeah. When you say there is no adultery involved, I take it to mean there is no sin or sexual one. Okay, adultery is when one person is married or both are married. That's how I define it. Adultery isn't between two single people. That's not adultery. That's fornication. Maybe I'm reading too much into this. If so, please help to clearly see. Okay, help clarify how he is not guilty of adultery. I agree with you that biblically speaking, he is taking upon himself to make amends, right? To right his wrong. I agree when you say we are not out to judge quickly without all the facts. Thank you. Who is this person? There's a lot of sense. Tina. I agree that being considerate and understanding of the human being when rebuking or trying to show the error in something should be should take primacy over ostracizing people for the sake of it. I think, though, that we are to evaluate these situations in order to educate ourselves personally to avoid similar entrapments. I also think, biblically speaking, putting away perceived evil from the assembly is the way to avoid it turning gangrenous. Wow, that's actually really wise. Yeah, you're right, because avoid all appearance of evil. So in this case, let's just say everything is right. Okay, let's hypothetically all these facts are true. The right thing to do is to uh, disfellowship them temporarily for a time until everything can be ironed out, because you have people talking about it. And it's not the people are just talking about it. It's giving a black eye to this way of life. So you have to get everything sorted out. Make sure that, for an instance, that he is separated from his wife. They are divorced. That these, the 40-year-old man and the 19-year-old girl now are going to commit to each other. They're going to go forward and be committed to each other. They're not going to, they're going to make right what is this mistake and just move forward. Right. I think that's important uh, in moving forward. And yeah, time heals all wounds. I think time will give it. Time is important for the congregation to move forward, and they can uh, reintroduce them to the congregation, or I should say, they can be reabsorbed. They can come back. Okay, they can be returned and not. They can be restored again to the congregation and not be swallowed up in sorrow. I think that's how it is expressed by Paul. It would have helped to know that the leaders in position made decisions in said matter, even if that was through counseling or private meetings. Bad things happen, but when we turn a blind eye to it, we allow it to potentially fester and become worse. In my opinion, a leader has to step in. A lot of mess and chaos could be avoided that way. Amen. I agree with this lady. She has a lot of wisdom in taking care of it. The problem most people have today is that their 20th century view is not Torah. Adultery, as you understand it, is not Torah. Uh, a man who commits adultery with a man's wife, with a neighbor's wife, so you can see it is a wife. Adultery is sex between a man that is married and a woman that is married to another man. That is adultery. In the example I present, the girl was not married, but the man was still married. So that is adultery on his part. And if the girl knew that the man was married, I think that's adultery too. I'm going to throw it out. I think it's adultery. If me being single, see a married woman, and that's my neighbor living next door, and she's hot, whatever, it doesn't matter if she's hot or not, and I do it with her, I'm doing adultery. That's another man's wife. We're both going to be stoned. If we're in a Torah abiding society, we will both be stoned. That's not acceptable to Yah. But if my neighbor is a virgin, she's not betrothed, and I am also, not betrothed, that's not adultery. That's fornication. So that's a different judgment altogether. So you can see there's a lot of factors here. There's a lot of specific guidelines that need to be adhered to. See, if a man finds a girl who's a virgin, so yeah, he did find, but it doesn't say the man is not married. It doesn't say, because if we're saying if a married man, then he's committing adultery, and so is the girl. That's a big no-no. Like it's a big, not a big no-no. What I'm trying to say is that is a big condition. That's a big if, because if it says a married man, automatically this shouldn't even be happening. If a married man finds a girl's a virgin, then yeah, it's wrong. It's already wrong because he is married. He broke his covenant. That's whoring. A woman isn't the only one who can whore. A man can whore too. If a man lures a virgin who is not promised and lies with her, okay, so again, these scriptures, we understand using common sense, just common sense. You don't have to be you don't have to be a scholar in scripture, a biblical scholar, but this man is single. He's not betrothed. He's not married. He's either a virgin or he's single or whatever, but he's not married. He's not committed to anybody. It is not adultery. The man is to take responsibility. Well, okay, I'm going to disagree. It's not adultery if he's single. I agree. But if he's married, then it is adultery. Adultery is breaking the covenant, the marriage covenant. That's adultery. So whether you are the one in the covenant or you're the one seducing a man to break the covenant, that's adultery. The girl's father has the right to refuse, just as the brother of Dinah did when Shechem raped her. Yeah, he did rape Dinah. It's true. Shechem asked for her to wed after the fact, but Shechem was single. He wasn't married or betrothed, and neither was Dinah. And they killed him, and that was wrong. Okay. I've been kind to this neighbor, even though he's obnoxious. Okay, what? I found out that he's evil, assaulted his wife, and raped his own daughter. Currently awaiting imprisonment. Are we supposed to judge between good and evil? To avoid all evil? I live alone. Okay, so I'm not sure if she's talking about the man in the newsletter or she's talking in general about a neighbor that she has. Just talking about it. Should she not judge between good and evil and avoid it? Yeah, I would keep him at arm's length. I wouldn't be close and have a relationship with this person. That's you can see by his fruits, he's not a good person. Abusing his wife and raping his daughter. Yeah, I would not just report that to the police, but not even deal with this person. That's going to corrupt you. Dear Mr. Dumont, very formal. That's good. According to the Aramaic English New Testament, Yochanan John. In later Greek translations, okay, the text of a woman caught in adultery, which was inserted. The story is non-existent in the Peshitta. Does not appear. Okay, that's important. Let me look this up. You got to set this straight. John 8, 2 to 11. Let's look this up. This may be the most heated topic in a long time on this Sightedmoon.com because it, depending on how you interpret the scriptures, this will be either adultery or fornication, depending on how you see things. So let's look at John, and it's chapter 8, I believe. And she's saying it's not actually in the original, in the Peshitta. I have this book called The Source, and maybe there's a footnote about that. And here's the book, just so you can see it, by Dr. Ann Nyland. So it says here, chapter 8, they all went home. Jesus went to the Mount of, Yeshua went to the Mount of Olives. Okay, I'm just looking for a footnote here. Here's a woman caught in the act of adultery. Okay. They said this to trap Yeshua. Sin no more. Okay, off you go. Don't sin anymore. Okay. So let's read the footnotes here. Okay. So it says here that the passage, verses 7, chapter 7, verse 53. So that's basically like what Karen is saying. The story of the woman caught in adultery is absent from, wow, okay, this is a huge, I didn't know that. It is absent from significant early manuscripts while appearing in many cursive manuscripts. The earliest unseals and many versions omit it. Metzger states that the passage is absent from the oldest form of the Syriac version, as well as from the Sahidic, sub-Achmimic versions and the older Bohairic manuscripts. It is absent from the Gothic version and from several old Latin manuscripts. No Greek church father earlier than the 12th century mentions it. Okay, wow. That's huge. Okay, wow. Oh, wow. This is massive. This is a cataclysmic difference here. I'm not saying not to forgive. I'm just saying this wasn't even there in a lot of original manuscripts. Just reading what I'm reading. Furthermore, the style and the vocabulary differ markedly from any Johannine work. Metzger states that it is a piece of oral tradition which circulated in certain parts of the Western Church, not the Eastern Church. However, so Eastern would be, the Middle East, Israel and whatnot, and Greece and Rome. However, St. Augustine refers to the passage and states that many excised the passage, as they interpreted it as giving license for married women to commit adultery. So they're saying this, keeping the story will lead to lax morals for married women specifically. This proceeding, however, shocks the minds of some weak believers. This proceeding meaning this story, or rather unbelievers and enemies of the Christian faith. For after, I suppose, of its giving their wives impunity of sinning, they removed from their copies of the gospel this, that our Lord Adonai did in pardoning the woman taken in adultery, as if he permitted sinning, who said, "Go and sin no more." It is also alluded to in the apostolic constitutions, as he also did with her who had sinned, when the elders set before him, and leaving the judgment in his hands, departed. This testimony is also mirrored by the Didascalia Apostolorum of the 3rd century. Photius of the 8th century does mention the passage while denying its authenticity. Didymus the Blind of the 4th century relates reading in the Gospels of a woman condemned by the Jews for a sin who was saved by the Savior. Okay. One argument states that many manuscripts include diacritical marks which indicate the passage is spurious. I don't know what that means, so I got to look that up. Okay, spurious means of illegitimate birth, bastard, false, false forged. Okay, so this passage is false, forged. However, Maurice Robinson argues that the diacritical marks were for the purposes of lectionary services, stating that the reading for Pentecost included John 7:52, yet to avoid ending the reading on a negative note. For out of Galilee there comes no prophet, the lectionary reading skipped over John 8:1-11, as the passage was not relevant for Pentecost and ended with verse 8, verse chapter 8, verse 12, I am the light of the world. If the pericope is removed, the narrative switches from the meeting of the Pharisees and and Jesus said to them again, an abrupt shift in the setting. Hodges argues that the narrative makes more sense with the pericope. I don't know what the pericope is. I guess that's the story of the woman caught in adultery. He states that as it was early in the morning, just as the sun was rising, with Yeshua teaching in the temple, that Yeshua used the first rays of dawn as the opportunity to say, I am the light of the world. This parallels John 7:37, where Yeshua speaks of living water on the last day of the festival, when water was poured over a rock to commemorate Elohim providing the Israelites water from the rock. Apparatus of Hodges. Okay, some witnesses place the passage after Luke 21:38, others after John 7:36. Okay, so there you go. It seems to be that, as she's saying, this story is non-existent in the Peshitta and many earliest Greek manuscripts, and that's, we just proved it. It isn't. This was an insertion, most likely. All the evidence that I've read, just from this footnote, is showing that it didn't exist. It wasn't even referenced. Why wouldn't you reference if it existed? But they're saying it was removed because they didn't want women to be, promiscuous or allow immorality, and that's possible too. But you know what? This is tough because I mean, if we know the character of Yeshua, he would probably forgive her. Most likely, he would forgive her just as he forgives us. And then you have this government spells with a CHINA, and they inserted their own version of the story where Yeshua was the one stoning her. So you know what? This is I'm gonna just say it's hard to say. I'm gonna say it's hard to say, but there's a lot of proof pointing to it not existing. Okay, so let's keep going. The story is non-existent in the Peshitta and the Kaburis Codex. It does not appear in the four earliest Greek manuscripts of John. If any Peshitta manuscript had included the story, it could have been shown as a product of a later period, and that's strong evidence too. Roth has written an accompanying essay in the appendix titled Woman of John 8, which goes into more detail about this omission. The first paragraph of this essay reads, later Greek manuscripts inserted additional verses into John 7:53 to 8:11 that tell a story of a woman caught in adultery. And I read a similar factoid. This story does not appear in either the Peshitta or the four earliest Greek manuscripts. Most Christian scholars are honest enough to acknowledge that John did not write this. Wow. That's a bold claim. Many opine that one of John's disciples must have written it and inserted it later. For those with a copy of the AENT, they might find the remainder of the essay interesting. Hi, Brother Joseph. Fantastic newsletter. I'm still digesting. However, I have an entirely unrelated question. At the top of your newsletters, okay, the biblical calendar. So he just has questions about the calendar. All right, so yikes! This was a very this was a very I wasn't even sure I was going to cover this newsletter, but it's important to cover this, not because we're going into people's private lives, but because we're all people and we all are there's a chance for anybody to be led into a situation like this, or maybe we've lived through it, we've experienced it. But the point is, we need to look at the Torah and see, how does Yah define adultery? How does Yah define fornication? What are the penalties for both? I think that's the heart of this matter. Was it fornication? Was it adultery? And it looks like it's more closer to adultery than fornication, because uh, the man seems to be married. Whether he was separated or divorced, isn't it that, according to the words of Yeshua, if a woman or a man is put away or divorced and someone else marries them, that's also adultery? I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't that what it says? But if we're going by the interpretation that, okay, if a man has given the wife a papers of divorce, certificate of divorce, uh, and it's for an acceptable reason, such as fornication and whatnot, she's been unfaithful, then the man can do that. So he's no longer going to be guilty of fornication, or I should say adultery. He will not be guilty of adultery if, say, for example, this 40-year-old man in the Philippines, he put away his wife because she cheated on him, served her with a certificate of divorce, and then he did this where he got involved with this 19-year-old woman, then that would no longer be adultery, because she met the requirement, meaning the wife of this man. She met the requirement for a acceptable divorce. I'm going to say Torah acceptable divorce. But if it's just, she just left him because she just doesn't like him, or, some petty reason, I don't know if that's still going to fall under the same grounds as Torah acceptable. But then again, this wife is probably not a Torah keeper, because, again, according to this newsletter, he's new to Torah. So perhaps if we're going to use Ezra and Nehemiah example, that he needs to put away his wife because she's not in covenant with Yah. So, wow, there's another gray area. So there's just so much we don't know. And for me to just say, okay, it's adultery, it's fornication, that would be wrong, because I don't have all the facts. And they're not here to speak for themselves. This man we're talking about can't just join this conversation and say, this is what happened. And his wife can't say what happened. And the woman, 19-year-old woman, can't say what happened. And the mother of the woman, 19-year-old, can't say what happened. And the best friend, which is the man's daughter, can't speak. Without all these witnesses, and maybe other witnesses as well, who can testify in a court of law or some similar situation, I can't really say much. I can only say what the Torah says. So it's better if I just present hypotheticals instead of saying, okay, this man's life. No, I'm going to say, okay, let's talk about me. If I meet a married woman and I'm single and I have sex with her, are we doing adultery? Yes or no? The answer is yes. She's married. And I knew she was married. But if I didn't know, maybe, well, you know what? You really should ask before you do it. Are you married? And if they lie to you and they deceive you, then maybe it isn't adultery per se, like out of ignorance, but it is because you found out later, but it's not like you did it blatantly. So maybe there's more forgiveness for you, the one who was deceived. But the wife or the husband, whoever, the person who is married, there's more guilt on them because they should know better. They agreed and made a covenant. They will be faithful as long as they live till death do them part. Right? That's the vow that many people make. So again, we have to look at what Torah says, and I don't think we should be judging this person because we don't have all the facts, not because we shouldn't judge or that we should just turn a blind eye, because this is just hearsay. Just taking all these people's words and just saying, okay, this is a fact, without giving them the proper uh, opportunity to speak for themselves. I don't think it's right. Um, I can type a comment right now and say, oh, this is a fact. This person's cheating on his wife. And this is a fact. This 19-year-old woman, just make up something about her and say, oh, she wasn't betrothed. But why would I say that? It's a lie. But who knows if I'm lying or not? Again, hearsay. It's not fair to judge or withhold judgment, or, it's just not fair to speak on it at all, period. Because I think it's prejudging. It's just accepting all these statements as facts, even though we're not even sure if we have the facts. The only one who knows the truth are these people involved, and Yah, who knows everything. All we can do is just look at Torah and again, discuss hypotheticals. And if this situation, whether it falls into it or not, is really none of our concern, because it's not our business, but we should be more concerned with how we live our lives, and about our congregation, those in our congregations too, those in the faith, how they conduct their lives. I'm not saying meddle, but we should be concerned with how they're dealing with their situations, because you don't want Yah to curse our community as the body of Christ, the body of Mashiach. We don't want to be cursed. It's going to defile the body. We're concerned out of love, not concerned like, oh, is that what happened? Like an itching ear kind of thing. Wow. Okay. So that's the end of this newsletter. Again, this is a very touchy subject, but I think I presented the truth of the word based on the Septuagint. You can see that specifically, I think the biggest difference that I have where I diverge, besides the adultery and fornication aspect, is when you don't set a sister against her sister as a rival. That's what it says is in the Septuagint. It's not just to annoy her. I mean, yeah, it's bad to annoy somebody, but it's really bad to set her as a rival. You don't want that competition in the family, and it's just toxic. It's a toxic environment that you are creating. Toxic situation. I don't know what else to say about this, but please comment. If we get 10 views minimum, we'll do another one next week. And I think we reached 10 views for the last one. I'm doing this one a little late. I usually do it on Friday evening, but I was so tired, slept early, so I decided let's just do this today. And again, this is such a touchy subject. I think a lot of people will probably watch it anyway. And I'm going to call this fornication or adultery and multiplying of wives. I think that's really what this topic is about. I'm going to end the video here. Shabbat Shalom. And we're going to have an interesting Zoom discussion if we talk about this topic, because really it's not about the people. It's not about the people in the situations, about what does the Torah say? What is acceptable to you? Okay. Shalom.